Yaqiu, I don't know if you know, but you're my single favorite person on Twitter.
Thank you.
Like, no question, really. It's kind of like there are very smart people, possibly smarter than you, I don't know, possibly more informed. There are funny people, but none of them is where I look at the little picture and the name, and I know this tweet is not going to be disappointing. All of them, either they don't tweet much. I don't know, like Chris Buckley has been really quiet lately. Or they humble brag like Bill Bishop. Or they're just weirdos. But when you pop up on my Twitter timeline, then I know this is going to be like fresh air among all the shit. And that's really nice. Thank you for that.
Thank you so much. That's a real compliment.
Yeah, because I don't know, like I don't think I curate my Twitter feed really well. I tweet about all kinds of shit, and sometimes I think maybe it's valuable, but sometimes I'm really just being a dick because I'm angry about something. But yeah, you don't do that, and I really appreciate that. And it's all thought out, and it's all the one thing is it's like how would you say sanguan?
Sanguan. I know sanguan. So.
Yeah, but what is it in English? Like the moral
worldview.
Yeah, or the moral compass is right on point. It's not like there might be something terrible happening, and then people would be bashing it, but it would be nuanced when you talk about it, and that's really nice. And we don't have enough of that. And I'm more of the bashing type.
Because I have another Twitter account I rent into this, the blank space.
No. No. I feel like such an idiot.
I have another Twitter account. I read stuff that is not China related. So.
Oh, I'm so naive.
No, that account I just used to read because I wanted to know what's going on in America. So.
Okay, well, really, maybe I should do that too, because I sometimes I have the urge to get something out of there, and I know it's not nuanced, and I know it's not.
No, I wanted to be like you, but I work for an institution. We have rules, so we can't just vent.
But this is so good. Then thank your institution, because it's so good. Really, it's so good. I wish all of Twitter was just not just you. That would be boring. But like more people like you, and then it would be good, and it wouldn't be so upsetting. And like people talk about the abyss, how Twitter is such a hellhole, but it's not. It doesn't have to be. If you follow the right people, it can be good. But yeah, I often look at my followers and I think, did I make them think this is a hellhole because because I vent? And yeah, that's something. Maybe I should get a small account where I just go like asshole, asshole, asshole. to Red Chris or something. I don't know. There's just so much stuff that makes me angry. I don't know how like people deal with it really.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Like
it's generally unhealthy. People, I think a lot of people, they're much nicer in real life, I've realized, than they're on Twitter.
Yes, but I still like Twitter because I like the back and forth. I like how I can see news kind of being created in real time. Not all of them, but sometimes, and I like following these really educated people. Like, if Buckley tweets something, that's going to be valuable.
Yeah.
Or Didi Tatlov or these people. But then there's also shit that I follow just because, I don't know, maybe some porn stars or some angry people. So yeah, it can be pretty hellish too.
Yeah.
But have you, what's your, you must have tried Clubhouse.
Yeah.
And what's been your experience on that?
I think, first of all, personality speaking, I don't like to join those conversations. I think another good reason why I'm not on Twitter, like tweet a lot and argue with people, is just a personality thing. I do not like argue. Like it needs a lot of energy to respond. So for example, if you are important in my work world, like, somebody I engage, then I feel I have a job duty to respond to you. Otherwise, I have no interest. No matter what you say, I just don't feel I think that's very different. A lot of people they're like telling themselves like I should not get into this tweet fight, right? They're like I'm impulsive. I never do that. I have no interest in getting into a fight. So it's like it takes me a conscious decision saying, you know, I have to respond to this person for XYZ reason.
Wow.
It's like a lot of people talking, and I don't know whether what they say will be valuable. But so I don't like this medium. It's not interesting. But for my job, I have to listen. So
I'm really jealous of that because I am the type of person I cannot not argue. I like when I see a car on the road and it's parked on the sidewalk, or worse yet, on the bicycle lane. I want to argue. Like I cannot let it fly. Sometimes I'm like old man yells at cloud.
No.
I'm like that. I would just flip off a car. Like there's no one in the car. But the car itself makes me so like I need to say something about it. And I feel like people like when they say stupid stuff on anywhere, then I feel compelled. Maybe I don't know what it is. Maybe it's my character. Maybe it's the German in me. You know how you feel like you want to tell people
correct the wrongs.
Yeah, that's very German. But I wish I was aloof. I think it might also be about self-esteem. Like how sure are you in your convictions?
I think it's more a personality thing. Some people like to argue, and I don't. Maybe it's because I have low self-esteem because I don't think I will win, and I think people will think I'm stupid. So maybe that's why I don't respond. But in general, I don't have this desire to respond.
Like
I always think that I have some kind of Asperger thing going on. That
interesting.
Okay, I think the screen has some issues. Now it's back. So I don't like chaos. So argument to me is chaos.
Oh.
And
what happens if you're standing in a line and you're waiting for your coffee and somebody gets in line? What happens?
I would tell them to go away. Like you're not supposed to cut the line.
Okay, that would be an argument that you would make.
Yeah. I think because that has real life utility.
Okay, and then you're standing in line and you're waiting for your coffee, and then a person next to you goes like, I don't know, says the N-word, let's say, or like, talks like, I don't know, bad about a certain group of people. Doesn't matter which group. What happens then?
I wouldn't react. Unless somebody is hurt. So somebody is, the person is saying some bad things to another person. Then somebody is a victim. Then I think the bystanders should come forward and say something about this situation. But if for example, she and he just talking to his friend, then I wouldn't interfere.
Oh, I get. I was in a situation. Let me see if what you make of this situation. I was in a situation last year or the year before, I don't remember, but I was on a train in Germany, and it was 2 seats facing 2 seats with a little table in between of them, and an old lady was sitting across from me, and then 2 guys entered, and I thought, what a cute gay couple. I remember because they looked so like loving, these little chubby German guys in their 50s. And then they sit down, and I understand they're not a cute gay couple. They're actually from this far right new party, the German Alternative Party. And they start talking to this old woman who is somehow unhappy about something. And they take her unhappiness and then they absorb it and give it back to her and talk about like how the immigrants do it and how Germany should be for the real population. And I even asked them, I'm like, who is the real population? They go like, well, the original population. And then I'm thinking like, I feel really uncomfortable because they talk so loud that it's for the whole train wagon. It's not just for us. And like, I feel like everybody's hearing this. I see a lot of rolled eyes around, but nobody's saying anything. And it sounds kind of like we are not in disagreement here because nobody's saying like, come on, what are you talking about? Who is the original population? Me? Or like some ancient Germanic person? Like who are you talking about? but I didn't say anything. And then I went back and I talked to my dad, and I was like, maybe I should have said something, because maybe in a corner of that train, there was a foreigner thinking like, what the hell is going on now? What is this atmosphere on this train? Why are people okay with this? But I didn't, because I didn't want to like have a bad atmosphere, you know, like we are arguing. I was shy. What do you make of that situation?
I think probably it's a good thing to actually say something in that environment. But I think it all depends on who you are, because first of all, I always worry about safety. So if that guy gets angry and he starts to, so I usually wouldn't do something because I fear my own safety. And so I think that's different for women and men, or, you know, you're big or small, stuff like that. So, but I think it's a good idea to speak up in that situation.
Okay, well, this is kind of, I think, a little bit the thing that I do, not necessarily because I have some sort of theoretical foundation for it, but just because it's in my character, that I do on my Chinese channel. Like, I will see stuff and I will talk about it and be like, I don't like this. This is not okay. You know, stop doing whatever you're doing there. But I'm also kind of like a person that's annoying, I think, you know, because maybe they want to have their own thing in China and they don't need some weird guy who looks like Marx to tell them, like, you know, don't do blackface on your New Year's show, or like, don't have a dictator for life. It might not be so good. But I can't help myself. This is my character, I think.
That's a good thing. I think that's, of course, a positive thing. I think there are values that are universal. A lot of, I mean, the Han Chinese, they are repressing the Uyghurs. Of course, it's the Communist Party, but a lot of people are in agreement. They do think, you know, the Uyghurs are a lower ethnic group than the Hans. And that's not just a Communist Party problem. It's a China's problem. The people are part of it. I think it's important to criticize that. I generally think there's this tendency to downplay the part of the Chinese, the regular people, in this repression, because to be sensitive. But I feel there are possibility to. I think there are, in this country, I feel there are things that looks very dangerous, like the racial attitude in this country, that we needed to correctly identify, rather than just think, you know, if the Communist Party is gone, or if the Communist Party is changing its mind, things will go away. I don't think that's necessarily true. I think there are more society-wide problem of this country. Yeah.
One thing that I noticed, I just picked up right now, was you said the Han Chinese. Are you Han Chinese?
Yeah.
So from my perspective, it seems a bit odd to say them as opposed to us. Not that
I think I should say us, probably. Yeah, us.
Yeah. Okay, but like I think this came out rather naturally. So maybe there's already an internal kind of a distance that you're creating. Could that be?
I think it's more because I work for an institution. For my job, I cannot identify what I refer to the Han Chinese as we, because then I'm speaking from my own identity rather than the institutional voice. So I think I just get into the habit of not saying we.
Okay. Okay. I was maybe, yeah, that makes sense actually, because I was I became sensitive to this when I was talking to a Jewish guy a few years ago, and we were talking about actually the Holocaust, which is never easy, but especially not if you're German and you're talking to a Jew, like an Israeli Jew, then you're really gonna be you know, I mean, for him it's uncomfortable, but for me it's also uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And so I said, like, these things that we Germans did, we did, and he said, wait a minute, like, usually you guys don't say we, you always say them. Like as if the Nazis, they fell from the sky and then they made you do stuff and you were victims too. And I was like, yeah, no, nobody thinks that. And he's like, no, listen to your compatriots. That's how you talk. And he said, it's nice that you say we. So I became sensitive to this for the first time. And I noticed a lot of Chinese people, they put this distance between themselves and then the other Chinese people, you know, and being like putting themselves in an outsider position and kind of watching the whatever, the play, whatever is unfolding. And I don't know if that's healthy. I mean, from your professional perspective, yes. But like, how much time did you spend in China? Like you were born in China.
Yeah, I spent my entire time in China until graduate school.
Wow.
Yeah. So my identity, it's very clear. I don't have like a blurred identity. I am from the mainland. I'm mainland Chinese. That's my first identity.
And was there a time when you were like nationalist?
Yeah, I think until high school.
And how like you were a 红领巾 and 共青团.
Yeah.
And how did that feel?
Well, I think I was the I don't know whether you know the 团支书, the Communist Party Youth League. Like in every class you have a leader in that.
Yeah.
I'm the 团支书, so I used to give speech condemning Americas. So
wow.
I do a good job, so I get selected by the high school to do that kind of work. Because I think when I speak to the public, I have this voice of like anger and like this affirmative anger. So yeah. Okay,
and I mean, I personally have a lot of stuff to process because I was born in 81. That's not an excuse. That's just background. But when I was young in my school environment, it was normal to be crypto racist and make jokes about Turks and Polish people all the time. And it was normal to be homophobic, transphobic as hell. And if you had asked me, I would have said like, no, I don't have anything against gay people. But if a guy touches so much as my arm, I'd be like, get off me, and then use a slur. And so like I'm processing these things and looking back at myself, and I'm thinking like, what was I even thinking? I don't recognize the person that was me. Does it feel the same for you? What does it feel like?
I think, first of all, I didn't grow up in an intellectual family. Some people like assume that I grew up in an intellectual family or my parents are activists. No, my parents are from the village. They're not educated. My mother can't read. So
she can or she cannot? She
cannot read.
Wow.
Yeah. So I don't grow up in like a middle class urban family. No, that's not my background. So to be nationalistic was a given. Like that's just like nobody was telling me the alternative. Because I don't receive education besides the school system. Like there's no books in my family because people don't read in my family. So I don't feel that I could be anything different until I graduated from high school. Then there was the internet. So I went to the internet and I talked to random people. Then it opened my eyes of people who are from different world. They are from Beijing. They, work for a magazine. They say stuff that was very different from. They care about stuff that was completely different from my environment. So that was how, like, I got into the whole, like, activist human rights world.
Was there? This is something that I ask my audience sometimes, because it feels like for me, I would expect a person who was brought up from in a liberal democracy to basically not be a Nazi nationalist, because it's very hard to be one, actually, because our whole education and society is trying to tell you don't be that. So actually, if you become one, it's kind of an accomplishment, actually. Like you really made yourself into an asshole and everybody tried to stop you. But if you're from a dictatorship that is promoting these things, as you said, then I don't have these high expectations. I'm not saying like this is some sort of cultural relativism, and it's okay then, and you should keep it that way. It's just that people that come from Germany that turn out to be Nazis or nationalists, let's put it that way, they disappoint me more than Chinese people that go down the path.
That I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, and so often I ask them, which was the person that led you down this, I don't know, we could use this huge word of enlightenment, but it's obviously very cheesy to call it that. I don't know a better term, but like, which was the person that helped you? Because, like when you ask, then at some point they're going to say like, well, yeah, my grandpa, or like there was this teacher, this one person, and I feel like that person should be thanked. So was there a person like that?
I would say yes, but those are people online that I communicate, and I don't have like real relationship with them beyond online. But
Wow.
at that time, I graduated from college in 2005. That time there was so much discussion online, and a lot of people who are more educated, like the intellectuals working for Nanfang Zhoumo or university, they are open to talk about stuff and they engage with you. So that was, how I was influenced. I think I carry that with me because now when I'm talking to young people, like people who are in college, they come to me and say, I know what's going on in Xinjiang. I want to do something. What's your view? Do you think if I go to human rights after I graduate, would I get in trouble? I'm a very introverted person. I do not like to talk to strangers, but I know that they are in the position that I was when I was in college. And those people who spent the time to talk to me helped me tremendously and helped me to get into what I do today. And I tell myself that I should always engage with these people because even it's probably 2 hours of my time or I have an ongoing relationship with them. But those are important for them because it was important for me.
Wow. And can you tell me about a little bit about the channels that you were actually using back then? Because it was a very different internet, wasn't it?
Yeah. Weibo, do you know Weibo? Do you remember that?
What?
Weibo. It's the Boo blog.
No.
Oh, interesting. Luo Yonghao, do you know Luo Yonghao?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. He created a Weibo. So all the liberal ones were on Weibo. So that's community. So everywhere at that time. So the Sichuan earthquake, I think around that time, there was so much discussion, even before. Yeah. So there were a lot of discussions on that website, then eventually got blocked. That was a huge community. It probably convened almost all the liberal intellectuals from the newspapers, magazines, universities. Yeah.
That was pre-Weibo and blog time.
Yeah, it was blog time. It
was when Han Han was just coming out with his blog, basically.
I think it was after Han Han.
After Han Han.
Okay. When I was in school, yeah.
Okay. Wow. And so this kind of, how did you see the advent of, or like, let's say the downfall of the blog and the advent of Weibo? How was that for you?
We become popular. I was already pretty sure of where I stand in terms of, this ideological spectrum. But Weibo was interesting was because, the engagement, the spread of the information so quickly, got so many people involved. And there was some effect, the Wenzhou train, high-speed crash. You just see how it was actually affecting the government. That there was power just by having so many people online saying the same thing. So I, of course, on Weibo all the time.
Were you one of those people like me? I feel like looking back at the last 20 years, I've been, well, not 20, but I started studying sinology in 2003. And I pretty quickly became a China optimist because I felt like you can't really transform this kind of country to a liberal democracy without going through the steps of maybe first getting a decent economy going and then maybe, strengthening the rule of law, whatever, blah, blah. But I was really optimistic. And then when Weibo came, I was like, wow, it was kind of like this Clubhouse atmosphere where I don't know how your Clubhouse experience was, but mine has been like there's so many reflected and kind people on there, and the disagreements are very civil actually, and Weibo wasn't civil, no, but it was like 多元化, like there was kinds of different people on there, and I felt like the party will never be able to close this Pandora's box. And this is going to go in one direction, and that's opening. And I'm so optimistic, and I'm so happy to be part of it. And I felt really moved. And then looking back, I feel naive because it didn't happen. Weibo is basically dead now.
Yeah.
Everybody has moved to, I remember even saying this a while ago. Weibo is like the public square, and Weixin is like WhatsApp, WeChat is like the living room. So they cleared out the public square, put everybody in the living room, and then they can just make them disappear or shut up, and it's fine. And so it's dead. And I feel like a fool. How do you feel? Were you optimistic?
I don't think I was ever optimistic to the point I think China will become a democracy just by gradually became, everybody talk. I never felt that way. Probably has something to do with my background. So I was never actually, in an intellectual bubble as some people are, because that's who their families are, that's where their friends are. In a way, I was more in touch with real people because that's where my family are. So the only people that share my ideas are online. There's no real people in my life who share my idea. So that is always in my mind. I know that. So the people online, there are a lot because there are a lot of Chinese people, but they're still a very, very minority.
Wow. So
yeah, for example, I went to a high school in our town, a xiancheng. It's the best high school in our xiancheng. But still, like, it's a small town, so there were no liberal ideas. No teacher will talk to you about liberal intellectuals in Beijing. So even in a high school, a best high school, I know those people don't exist in my real life. All the people who share my ideas are like big city people.
Do you? I don't know if that. I mean, I don't dare to disagree with you, being sort of a guest who just kind of walked around a little bit. But the way I felt in China was that the distribution of kind of intellectually awakened people was pretty fair across the spectrum and across the country. It wasn't so much that because a person was from the big city and got a good education, that they were not a totally ideologically framed idiot. And it wasn't so much that because somebody was maybe just working in a field, that they weren't thinking about things and being like I actually had conversations that were rather deep with just peasants. And I'm saying just peasants because where does he get his information? The government didn't exactly provide him with all kinds of ways to acquire knowledge, did they? So so they must be there. But what I'm thinking is it maybe it's a little bit like going back to me being homophobic in my school. So my school had 600 students. On average, 1 in 10 people is homosexual. If I'm not mistaken, it might be less or more, it doesn't matter. So like in my school, on average, we would have about 50 people that might identify as homosexual, but I didn't know a single one. Why not? Because they were uncomfortable. Because the whole atmosphere was me and my other friends walking around and throwing around these slurs. But that doesn't mean they're not there. That just means they're kind of in hiding. And so maybe in your school, they're in hiding. I don't know. This is how I feel, but I might be wrong.
But they are in hiding from you. But if you are one of the homosexual person, you probably wouldn't know. So, right? So if you're liberal, you probably wouldn't know the liberals in that school.
So there were really no liberals.
There are no, but I do think there are difference in terms of city people and town people. That was much more clear when I came to the States. I would have never met those people if I stayed in China, because they were so privileged that I didn't know that those Chinese people exist until I came to the States and know they exist. People who they grew up in China, they came here for private high school and then got to Ivy League school here. And their parents are professors in Beijing. So those people had never existed, the Chinese people, until I came to America. So then I realized, even, my family are not necessarily poor. We are uneducated, but, my dad has a business. But still, to what extent, probably economically speaking, my family and a family, middle class family in Beijing, probably we grew up economically similarly. But just the worldview, how we experience the world, what we read when we grew up was completely different. So they had, they probably had traveled somewhere outside China when they were at least in university or even in high school, or I had no idea. They have some family members or friends who are not from China. I don't have any friends, families that are beyond my town. So I think there's difference.
Yeah. Okay.
That was, I felt very differently. It was not because people from the, not big cities are less smart or any less intelligent or any less hardworking. It just didn't get the information. So they didn't know to apply for graduate school, that you could possibly get a scholarship to go to a US university. You just didn't know those information. You didn't know how to apply. Your biggest aspiration is to take the civil service exam and get into the government. That was your world. That was what could happen to you in the best way. Yeah, that was a huge inequality in my mind.
Okay, taking this, wouldn't it be fair to say that the people that you run into now in the States, these educated Ivy League people, that if they're from privileged families, there might be a certain subset of children of officials, of party members, of businessmen, of all that. But those people, basically, they had to become this part of this stratum of society before. So they just kind of did it before. Maybe they moved up in the 80s or in the 90s when they were kids, and their kids are kind of well off and everything. But wouldn't that be kind of an argument for saying, let's just let them economically develop, and then these town people will also be on that level, because first you need to get there economically, and then you will maybe get the world view.
Well, I hope this happened, but this just never happened. I think not everybody, a lot of people believed in this, and I wish it worked out, but it never worked out. So,
okay, I would like to test an observation that I have that I'm not very confident in. So, so this observation that I have is, I talk to Chinese people that are abroad, a lot of them, and it seems to me as though the children of these officials, where other Chinese people would be disparagingly talk about them as guan as these rich official kids born out of corruption. A lot of them are very liberal. A lot of them are dad made money in the system and is still making money in the system, and this money got you to, I don't know, Germany or something, and then you go and study political science and you oppose that system. And then other people from China might be nationalists, but you're not. Or they might be kind of liberal oriented and hate you for being part of the system, but you're not. Is that an observation that you share, or am I off here?
I think so. The more liberal people I encounter from China, the more from the more privileged background, they're parents are either in business or from the working in the government. That obviously, that to me is a pretty, I agree with that observation. It's just unfortunate. I think first of all, people who go study, of course this is all generalization. There are people when they go study arts, but generally people who study areas that don't obviously make money or don't obviously lead to a job are people who are from economically privileged background because they never had this worry of to make money. And also they are exposed more than their peers to different ideas. The joke is always Chinese people hate the Japanese people except the ones they actually know.
Doesn't that go? Yeah. Doesn't that go for everybody though? Doesn't that go for everybody? I mean, every racist has a black friend, no?
I think it's like they have more interaction with people outside of China. They know the world better in different ways. They're exposed to different cultures, people, so they're have more liberal views than the average Chinese, and that has so much to do with the privilege with where they're from.
They might have some foreigner teaching them English when they're very little, and just being exposed to some Michael or whoever, Tom from the States, or and just kind of just the exposition to these things is already something. This reminds me of something kind of similar, but from a different background. I've never been to Saudi, but I met a Saudi girl in Azerbaijan who had fled there. She was from a very rich family. She was the daughter of the second wife, and super rich, like had everything done for her. But she said for some reason her father and her mother decided to put her in an American school. So she sounded like a California girl, like the accent and everything. And then she couldn't live in Saudi. It was impossible for her. She didn't like the family. She didn't like the concept. She didn't like having all the servants, and she didn't like the surroundings. So at some point when they went on a family vacation, she took the passport that they gave her and she fled. And she worked as a teacher in Azerbaijan, English teacher, shared an apartment with 2 other people and was piss poor. And she said, "This is the best time of my life. This is a free country. I can tell you, Azerbaijan is far from a free country. But for her, this was awesome." And I remember this one thing that she said to me. She said, "Why did they put me in an American school? They should have known. I could never be happy after that." And I felt like, this might be happening, like not on that scale, but it might be happening to a lot of these privileged kids. But again, wouldn't this mean that once there is a sizable middle class, this middle class, the offsprings, at least a part of them, would also be privileged enough to be exposed to these ideas, and that would mean good things for China, no?
I think just the Communist Party control is so tight. So I think there's 2 issues. The middle class getting bigger is always better.
Yeah.
People get more educated is always better, regardless what the political system is. But I disagree that this kind of, the enlargement of middle class, the better educated Chinese people they're able to eventually lead the country to transform to a different type of system. I think the Communist Party's grip on China is very tight. So the Communist Party got insecure when it was witnessing the middle class getting so big and people getting more educated, and there are so many chaotic discussions online. So they decided to take that away because they feel insecure.
Okay. So the outlook is bleak from where you're standing, and it has always been bleak.
It was definitely getting more bleak or bleaker.
Yeah, of course.
English version is, and then I think, I don't know, depends on what generation you are, or when I was in university, that was Olympic time. My impression was of Beijing Olympic was bad because all I remember was that girl who was singing the song that she was actually not the one who was singing. I don't know whether you remember.
Yeah.
And I was like, what the crap is wrong with this country? Just let the real girl. I mean, they are very, very cute. And so I had a bad impression of Olympics. But if you're just several years older than me, you would remember the good time that leads to the Olympic. So, that feels different. So I think I was at the age when I start to be political conscious about China was getting worse. So I didn't actually that clearly experience China was getting better. Everybody's so hopeful. So that kind of stayed with me. So in 2008, during Olympic time, I was 20. So since 20, China has become worse and worse. So, and if you are, you were born in 1981. So if you observed China earlier, China was getting better. So that kind of stayed with you.
I can't really say that. For me, it's been different because I like to describe my own relationship with China in 3 phases. So the first phase is I'm outside of China, and I'm kind of like thinking they all look the same. They're communists, whatever that means. They eat rice, and they're very scary because of this collectivism. Everybody talks about collectivism all the time as if they're ants. And then I get there. That's the first phase outside of China. I'm thinking like that's really like they just crush people with tanks and whatever. And then I get there, and the second phase is like, wow, this is so much different than I thought. They all look different. Like after a while, you even have categories of Chinese people where you go like, fat guy with funny hair and like a weird accent. That's that kind of fat guy, and I know where to put him. And it's so fun, and you can talk about stuff freely. Like I remember in 2005 being in a restaurant and talking about stuff like Wang Yaqiu. You could talk about him.
Yeah.
And I felt like I had kind of been led on by the media environment. Like it wasn't that bad. It was actually, okay. And also kind of like, what can you expect? You can't just say like, be like us now. When like 20 years earlier or 30 years earlier, they were happy about 1 egg a week. Then you got to kind of cut them some slack. And I was watching the coverage of the Olympics, and I was like, they didn't. I mean, yeah, okay, they bulldozed a bunch of buildings. They were really, really strict about it. But then, was it really that bad? In the end, I remember reading a news article, and it said like, finally, the Olympic Games will go back to London, and they will be like more humane and more flawed games. And I was like, okay, so like now we're unhappy that it was too perfect. Like this is the criticism now. It was too perfect. I mean, they didn't have a terrorist attack. Nobody got killed. And some people are unhappy about their houses. Basically, that's what I got from it when it happened. And I was like, really not so bad. And then the third phase comes, and the third phase breaks your heart. When you understand that you talk to a regular person, and after a while, these deep traumas, they surface.
Yeah.
They shouldn't have them. Everybody has trauma in their lives personally. It's normal. Just stuff that happens to you that is difficult to process. People die, tragedies happen, but then political trauma being forced upon you just because you were unlucky to be born in a certain place should happen. Like me as a German, political trauma? Hell no, nothing. I know nothing. Like I walk around in China oblivious to what can happen to me. I walk through Iran. I don't care if you and me, if we're in Iran and we go to a park, I won't keep a distance just because you're a woman, because I don't have the awareness, because I don't have the trauma. I'm not scared of anything. They shouldn't be, but they are. And then you realize they are so damaged. And then it falls apart. This nice illusion of it's not so bad. It is bad. It's just bad in a nuanced way. And that was, I don't even know why I brought this up, but this was my journey to kind of thinking like, yeah, this is not right how it's happening. You can't leave it like that.
Yeah.
I definitely had the optimism and the positivity phase, definitely.
I think, you know, you were talking about 2005. 2005 when I was in high school in a small town. That was all about study. So there was internet. So I would go to Baidu and download a song and listen and watch some soccer. So that was the extent I used the internet. It was only after I graduated from high school, which is 2009, that I really, it's 2005, I graduated from high school, I started to use the internet. I think there was a period that from 2005 to 2009, that was a period that I was online all the time. That was where I absorbed so much information. But I think during that time, I became exposed to the things that I had no idea exist. I think it probably would be different from if you grew up in an intellectual family. For example, the book that actually got me into the whole, alternative universe is the book written by Mao Zedong's doctor, talking about.
Oh yeah.
That book, first of all, it's interesting. It's all about private life, dirty secrets.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my God, this is so different from what I knew about Mao Zedong. The whole time I was exploring things I had no idea because nobody told me an alternative version of anything besides what the school was telling me. My parents, I eventually asked my dad, do you know Tiananmen? He said he watched on TV. He knew something, but I never got any information from them until I asked them. And that was such a remote event to them, like, yeah, something happened, but we were peasants. So what was my point? I think during that period, I was like in school exploring what's going on. There were a lot of discussions, whether I felt optimistic or not. I just wasn't really like in the observer mindset. It was all about me absorbing stuff. I wasn't, I think, yeah. Then, there was always this internet that got censored, website taken down. So there was all this stuff going on. So I wasn't feeling necessarily optimistic, but at the same time, it was natural. I interned in that migrant workers center in Beijing, talking to them, following the human rights lawyers wherever they go, feeling, I'm part of this. That I did feel. But I wasn't feeling this is going to lead to the country become a democracy. So I left China. Then things just go worse. And then now it's just bad. So
I agree, it's pretty bad. Was the transitioning process painful for you?
Knowing that China was getting worse?
No, leaving the kind of happy you behind and becoming a sort of a new you that is kind of critical.
I think personality-wise, I was never the person who liked to conform. That was, I think that actually is the foundational reason why I'm in this field. I will tell you that in high school one time, so we were supposed to write an essay for 800 characters about something. I don't remember. And I hate that topic. So I think we had like 45 minutes to write. I literally wrote one sentence on that 作业本. I said, I don't know why other people can endure this education system. I wrote my in 45 minutes. Then everybody handed in their 作业本. Then the teacher actually read that sentence to the entire class, what I wrote. And everybody laughed. At that moment, I felt I could not live in this country.
Wow. That's a strong moment. What you're saying reminds me of Hannah Arendt, when she talks about personal responsibility in a dictatorship. And she says that there are people that are just predispositioned to be doubtful. And like the big disappointment that she had was that, and this is kind of like something that might be detrimental to my original point that, they will get more developed and then they will get more educated and then China will get better, because Hannah Arendt's big disappointment, it seems like, was how the intellectual class around her very early on in the 1930s kind of just gave into this Nazism and was like, yeah, okay, it's fine. You know, like they have all the resources financially and intellectually, and they're around Hannah Arendt. And they're kind of like, well, yeah, you know, the Nazis, it's kind of okay. And they arrange themselves with it. And there's so much disappointment that you can feel in her writing when she talks about this, because she feels betrayed by them. And she feels like they have a bigger responsibility, it seems. But then, yeah, she mentions this one type, this type of person that will just be doubtful, like not as a personal accomplishment, but just as a natural kind of trait of character. Maybe that is what you're describing. Like you're just not easy to conform. But then what that leads me to is, are you, like, when you came to the States, what was there a process of different phases? Like, let's say before you come, you're like, the States is going to be perfect. And then you get there and you're like, oh, this is really effed up. Was there a process like that? Are you still a doubter? Like, are you full of doubts about everything also in the States?
No, I think there's definitely a transformation of my understanding of the States. That probably, you know, like a trauma I'm dealing now, because I came here with this idea. You know, the Chinese, during the liberal phase, they adore the U.S., the system, especially conservatism, you know, classical liberalism, all that good stuff of freedom stuff. And I came to the States with all those ideas. Like, I adored them.
In which year? Which year was that?
2009.
9. Okay.
Yeah. So I came to the States with all these great ideas, and then first of all, I encountered liberals. I mean, I came to Washington D.C. and they were so critical of the U.S. I felt strange. Yeah. Like, why are you so critical of this country? It's great. And then I realized there are a lot of problems with the States. You know, the way they dislike universal healthcare is just puzzling. Like, it's obviously not working, and it's
puzzling is good.
The cost is so high than, you know, other Western countries. Like, it just makes no sense. I think since Trump became president, I felt I was in some kind of trauma. You know, you were describing Hannah Arendt of some intellectuals that went along with this trend. It's happening in the United States. Look at the conservative intellectuals, the elites who are educated and believing in this strain of thoughts. And they just went along with the entire Republican Party just went along with Trump. So this is happening in the United States. And all those, like, you know, America still have freedom. I love that part of America. There's so much discussion. Everybody has a voice. Everybody wants to express their opinion. I love that. I still love that part of America. But then I realized a lot of problems don't get solved just because people talk. Like, so many Americans love to talk, but, well, the problem is still there. You know, I start to have this thought, like, well, maybe America is just only good at this freedom part. All the other working.
You could tattoo this on I don't know which body part, but you could at least make a shirt. Maybe America is just good at the freedom part.
Yeah, like nothing else is working.
Oh man, yeah. So okay, so you're still a doubter. That's just you.
Yeah, I think so, but I think everybody to an extent is a doubter, right?
I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure. It feels like there are obviously different characters in people that we have, and feels like for many people it's fine to just kind of accept the paradigm as it is, and then if the paradigm changes, they move on. This is what happened on a large scale after World War II. You know, all those Germans, do you think they were not Nazis during World War II? Or had they never been Nazis after it? It seems like this Jewish guy told me, like, yeah, the Nazis fell from the sky, they did something, and then we're like, yeah, we're poor Germans. It moves along with the paradigm. There's for the large part. And then if you kind of, if you're the doubter, then you will be annoying. But problem that I have with this for myself, I'm not talking about you here, but about myself. I have doubts because like there are things that I obviously don't doubt. Like, for example, I don't doubt that maybe it would be good if we all got the vaccine against COVID-19. Because I had COVID-19 and I don't wish it on anybody. Like, it wasn't terrible in my case, but still, like, if you're in bad health, then don't get COVID, get a vaccine. But it seems kind of like in this particular issue, I'm not a doubter. I accept a lot of the paradigms around me. I'm German. Obviously, I like the healthcare system. I don't want guns around me. I like the EU, you know, all these countries working together. So basically, like, where do I doubt really? Like, I doubt the stuff that is outside of my own paradigm. I doubt the dictatorship in China, and I doubt, I don't know, like the Trumpism. But wouldn't it be like really doubting stuff if I was doubting my own stuff and I became like maybe an anti-vax person?
Well, I think there are objective truths. Like, I'm not a doctor of scientific truths. If the science consensus, I don't know about global warming. I have no science knowledge. But if the scientific world says global warming is happening, this could happen if we don't do anything, I believe them. I believe in vaccine because that's what scientists say. So I think I believe in the fundamentals of, how the academia, I believe what they say, the scientific world. So I think I'm not a doubter in some fundamental things, But, speaking of a doubter, in America, I felt I'm much less in touch with the less educated people in America. So I always very aware that I live in American bubble, no doubt. I would say I know more people who have graduate degree than not have graduate degree. My world in America is very limited. I came here as an adult. I got into this big city, knew people who are very educated. So that is something that I'm always aware that when I come into America, I'm not really in touch with, I would say, the majority of America.
This is kind of touching on this weird concept of a real America. You didn't use the word real, and I'm grateful about it because it seems so odd to say, okay, those are real and these are not real.
Exactly.
But it seems to be a little bit of a conundrum there, where, like, obviously you're in some sort of bubble, and you will always be in this bubble. When has been the last time that you went home? Or let me ask another question: where is home?
My home. That is. I mean, I was talking to a friend yesterday saying, do you feel rootlessness? A sense of. I absolutely feel that way. Given the situation, I wouldn't go home unless it's necessary. Like when my parents, I would consider going home unless it's very necessary. So I don't actually actively think about that because it's probably some kind of trauma. Like you refuse to actually think about the question unless it becomes a question that you have to think about. Now I live in New York. I probably will live in New York for a long time, but that, I don't have family, so I don't have connections that are so rooted that I would feel New York is a home. But I have friends in New York. I love New York. It's I would say the most diverse city in the world. And
it is the city.
Yeah.
I only spent 1 week, but I couldn't fathom the cityness of the city. Like, I've never been to a city that was more of a city than New York. They can be bigger, but they can be more of a city. Like, I'm a bit jealous.
I love everything about New York, especially like I'm a very introverted person. Like I don't feel like people say New Yorkers are rude, and I love this rude culture. Like, like people are not very nice. Hey, how are you? Very nice. I was like, just don't talk to me.
Okay. One question that I have is, for me, it is difficult to come to terms with the fact that I will not go back to China. When I left her, or like when I left China, I actually found myself crying in that moment because I was looking back at the border and I could see the buildings there. And of course, I had mixed feelings. It was in 2016, so it was already pretty bad.
Mhm.
But still, it felt like the majority of the people there, no matter what our political views are, but I have some sort of affection towards them, and it's very primal, this affection, and I've put in so much work personally to get to know them, and so it's sad, but it's not something that I made unconsciously. Like the procession or the progress of time when I entered the social media in China in 2011 up until the point when I left China and I understood I will not go back was there was some points where I could have kind of turned around and said like, yeah, let's kind of be civil and not say what's on your mind, and then it would be fine, and I could even make nice money there. But I didn't, and the only price that I paid is I don't go back to see those nice people. But then I wonder, did you make a conscious decision that kind of that you cut these ties and you knew, okay, I'm doing stuff now that will make it difficult for me? That must have been very painful.
I mean, yeah, absolutely. It's painful and it's a long process. You have ups and downs, but I would say it's absolutely an unconscious decision. I knew that the country is going to be more repressive, and what I have to choose either to not say anything, eventually to not say anything, or just come forward and, you know, make some sacrifices and do it. And because, you know, some people would choose, I could say something, but I can still go back to China to have a relationship, you know, live there or something like that. But I understood at the time that this was not going to be an option down the road. Maybe I can do it now, but in the future, it is not going to happen. So make a choice. I made a choice that I want to speak my mind, understanding that, you know, means that there are, you know, my parents in China. They are not going to leave China. So there are painful things that could happen to me in my life because a choice that I made early. I'm very conscious with that. Several years ago, I would have dreams of me when I wake up during the middle of the night to go to the bathroom. I would think that I was on the bed in my home, you know, obviously in my home in China. So there are those vivid memories of I grew up there. It's the village. I know where everything is. I know the people there, and that part will, like, you know, forever be lost. And that was, of course, traumatic. All the relationships, all the, you know, family, most family, you know, friend. Most of my friendship are now nurtured after I came to the States. So the family part. Also, just grew up on the land. I would say, you know, the soil, the land, the environment, the architecture, the food, the culture. You know, it would never be the same.
I cannot.
The environment that I lost. Yeah.
I cannot understand. Like I can intellectually understand, but I cannot really like pretend that I understand this pain really. Yeah. So I'm sorry. Really, that's all I can say about this.
I think it happens to a lot of people. Like you seek solace from people who made the same choice.
Yeah.
And to be honest, you know, I should not complain because I speak the language fluently. I live in New York. It's a very diverse place. So I eat Chinese food. So it's not like that I'm suffering some kind of causal loss. I'm still in a pretty privileged position to, you know, currently. So I don't think I should complain that much. But of course, personally, it's a loss, and it's painful. Like thinking about the things that I have lost, and yeah, I cry.
Yeah.
Wake up and just weep.
And you used the word home to refer to it when you were talking about it just now. So that's there, I guess.
Yeah.
Do you talk to your parents on like WeChat all the time, or how does that go?
I don't want to talk this publicly.
Good. Okay.
So I can tell you, but don't make it into the field.
No. Then don't. I'm just gonna leave this uncut. We're just gonna have one conversation. Thanks for telling me. I'm so unprofessional. I'm very sorry. I should have introduced you at the start. You know, I should have said like, this is my friend, my very esteemed Twitter idol, Wang Yaqiu, and she works for Human Rights Watch, and she's awesome. But I was a little bit nervous, I guess, or maybe I'm just an idiot. But yeah. So how did you get into Human Rights Watch?
I was working for another human rights organization, the Committee to Protect Journalists. It's a press freedom group. So I got into human rights field earlier than I joined the Human Rights Watch. So after I graduated, in the United States, as a foreigner, you have to find a work which is very hard to get as a social science major. So I went to a consulting firm. Basically, there are a lot of Chinese officials and business people who came to the States and they want some kind of engagement. I was in the role to serve them when they come to the States. And I did not like that job. I vividly remember like every Friday morning when I go to work, I became so happy because the weekend is coming, I don't have to work. Then every Sunday around the noontime, I felt depressed.
Okay.
Well, the new week is coming. So eventually I got out of that job. I worked I wrote articles. They were not making that much money, stuff like that. But then I got full-time job in the human rights field. Then that feeling of feeling terrible on Sunday afternoon and feel great on Friday morning just completely disappeared because I know I was working something that I like.
And something that is, I guess, meaningful.
Yeah, I think meaningful probably is secondary to what I like. Because that is probably more, what's the word? Like, when we were talking about character and personality. Some people, it's like the happiness just is so attached to like I work on something I like. That is so important. Like the meaningful part just came later. So I had a so low tolerance of things I don't like. Like some people, they don't like studying the fake Marxism in school, right? Nobody likes it. But I was so resistant. That was make me different. It's not the dislike because people don't like. Nobody like it. But I was very, very resistant. Like I could not stand it. I think that was the difference.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think I work. I like where I work. Like then I found it meaningful.
It seems like from what you're telling me, like the first thing we talked about, and I'm going to leave this in this video because it's fascinating, is that you don't like to waste your time arguing with people. And then we moved on and we found out, or like I found out, that you're actually a person that has very strong convictions and is kind of like not easy to go along with others.
Correct.
You're a doubter. So that's basically a person that likes arguing. Like you would be like, no, like you did in class when they made you write that 800 words thing. And you were like, no, I'm not doing that. And now you channeled it, it seems like, into meaningful work where you don't have to put your this doubtfulness into individual arguments with individual people, but you actually do something with it. Is that kind of happen?
Yeah, I think these two are totally not contradictory. I'm just not an arguer. Like I don't like argue back and forth with a person, but I do like to express what my thinkings are. So I express in a proactive way, like I write something, I talk, but I just don't like argue with other people. That's just totally a personality thing.
I need to learn this. I need to learn this from you, really. I was talking to, I don't know if it's appropriate to say it here, whatever. Do you know Badiu Cao?
Yeah.
I like the guy so much. But he has this thing that I don't like about him. That he gets into arguments with people and then he cusses them out. And I don't like this about myself either. So the other day I wrote him a message and I was like, hey, Cao Cao, do you want to make a deal that we just argue less and don't insult people? And we kind of have this pact and then maybe we can become a bit better. And he was like, yeah, let's do that. So we will try that because it's really, I think, doing this thing that you do is awesome. Really, and getting into petty arguments is not awesome. this is something that I'm wrestling with, because it's kind of like I'm a fish in the water and you throw in bait, I will go there. I can't, and I feel just so dumb, but it's me. Yeah, and I gotta learn. But yeah.
I wonder why I'm not that kind. Like, because I have the opposite problem. For example, if somebody who's from another institution, he works in the same field, and he posed a question to me, and I was like, okay, I have to respond to that because it's a valuable question, and he's in my field, and it's a respectful way to communicate. And I just like, I need to make a conscious decision, effort. Okay, need to respond.
Wow. Okay.
I think it's just like probably it is habit I developed because I like to say something more in a more facing the public way rather than directly question way.
Yeah, and like you make real arguments, like real structured points, not like this back and forth where you're just kind of being snarky, you know. That I do.
Yeah. I mean, snarky can be fun, so.
It's fun, but it's the kind of thing that it lives in the moment, but your stuff doesn't live in the moment. And that's, I think, the difference. It stays there, and it's valuable. I would like to ask if like, because I get asked so many questions from my audience. A lot of them are maybe already there, like kind of transition towards like, you know, I don't like what's going on in China, but many of them are not very stable, I think, in these convictions. Like, it seems like it's an exploration, like the process from this going to there. Do you have like things that you would usually tell them if they ask you, like, you know, stuff to read or where to go in which direction intellectually? What would you tell them if a young person is coming to you and says, like, I'm a bit lost here. What's going on in China right now, I don't like it, but I need more. Like, I need to find something.
A good question. I mean, a good story to care about what's going on in Xinjiang. Like, it's really bad. It's you know, the surveillance or the discrimination. I think it's a good starting point to know how bad China is. And I like, first of all, I'm not like a big reader of books. Like, people recommend 1, 2, 3 books. I never felt that I was so influenced by a book. You know, it's always a gradual process. Read some news, mainstream news media, follow some Twitter. You will naturally start to form your opinion, your views after you spend more time reading New York Times, Wall Street Journal is fine, all their articles on China. Follow some, you know, well-known Twitter people who tweets about China. Gradually, you will know your preference, know where you stand. It's a process.
I feel as though the Xinjiang thing might not be the best kind of Rumen, like an entry point, because the reaction I got from a lot of people was they are critical of the government, yes, but this thing is so horrible that they don't want to believe that their country or their people, their neighbors, can do something like that. And I think this is also reflected in Germans trying to get their heads around what happened in the Third Reich, when a lot of people were like, this cannot be true because it must not be true. And it's I think I was listening to this argument on Clubhouse where a person was like, okay, like, so you don't believe what's happening in Xinjiang, you believe the government version, but when something a little bad happens at your home, do you believe the government, what they say? Why do you believe them in Xinjiang, but you don't believe them when it's these small things in your home? And I found that a very strong argument to kind of like the things that you can touch and feel and hear that are around you, you can actually validate them, as opposed to somebody tells you it's a concentration camp and you go like, is it Auschwitz? Not really. Is it Bergen-Belsen? Not even that. It's kind of like an internment camp, if we're being honest, and we haven't even seen them. and then you get travel reports from people that went to Xinjiang and they're like, everything is fine. So then you go like, well, this kind of matches what I want to think, because I don't want to think of my country as a country of monsters. So I don't know what to think about that. That's just kind of how I feel.
Yeah, I think you're right. I agree. I mean, like Xinjiang is such a glaring thing that if the entry point is Xinjiang, people just automatically give up.
Yeah.
But I think people, I don't know. The reason I mentioned Xinjiang was it's also, I think, tied to my personality. When something was so shocking, like you just get curious, then you like got into it, then you like explore more and more. So that is like maybe just me who likes, something is so shocking that I would be so curious to know why it is. Maybe to some people else, they don't like the shock stuff from in the beginning. They want something mild.
Oh.
Yeah, I think people are differently, have different approach. I mean, I agree with you, definitely, that things happen to them personally. They have much higher like suspicion about official propaganda than things that are far away. That's why, any kind of propaganda about America and Japan is so successful, because, that's not what the life you experience. Like you believe in what it says about America because you don't know anybody there. So I don't know. I think, I think it's like me. When I first got into this whole alternative universe, it's because of Mao Zedong's doctor's book. It's not even a good academic book. It's just like secrets about Mao's private life. But as a teenager, it's like, wow, you got curious. Then you became, interested in the whole field, explore more and more. I think people's paths are probably different. Or, you suddenly know that guy has some interesting story, and you start to explore from his standpoint. Yeah.
Looking back, do you take that book seriously still?
No.
Yeah, me neither.
I mean, I think my point was like, if I started from somebody recommending a very good book, like written by a professor, I probably, I was like, okay, this is boring.
Yeah. Okay.
It's like.
Okay. Yeah, I struggle with this a little bit because I feel like, for example, Hannah Arendt, she has her problems, obviously, but it's very compelling, the way she builds this argument, and it's kind of applicable to many societies.
Yeah.
And so it's really something good to have as a tool to kind of look around you and think like, what would she say? You're not bad if you have her in your corner. But then it's really dry, and it's really
the origin of totalitarianism, that kind of thick book.
Yes, well, even the thinner ones, they are difficult, and they're not fun, and they don't describe anything that is tangible around you, where you go like, well, this, I recognize it. You have to really put in some effort, so you can't really tell people read this and you'll be fine. And I struggle a little bit with this because what are you going to tell them? Read some Peter Hessler? I don't know.
I haven't read Peter Hessler, so.
Well, it's nice and it doesn't hurt you, and it's it's good. I take everything. It's really good, but I don't know like what to tell people, because I have never gone that path. Like I'm born in Germany, everything is fine. I go to China and I find out, well, it's not so good, and then I talk about it. Easy. So
I think you're referring to people who are like Chinese-born people, right?
Yes, who are searching.
Yeah. I don't know. I think people students come to me. They would write me emails. Sometimes they say who they are. Sometimes they don't. They would just. I know I got to know Xinjiang somehow. Like then they go like, what I'm gonna do, like whatever stuff you recommend. I think those people are already in the right place, so they're gonna find more and more. They're gonna form their own opinions. Yeah. Maybe that is a reflection of me not reading books, so I can't recommend books.
Oh yeah, it wasn't so much about books. I think what you said about these Twitter accounts and stuff is helpful. Yeah, I think I'm gonna compile a few as well. But I was just wondering if there's something that like you said, this what's his name, Zhao Lijian, or no, that's a different guy. What's his name? Li Sijui. the doctor.
Yeah, something. Yeah.
Something, yeah. But like this book stuck in your mind as something that you personally that kind of opened up something new for you. So yeah, I was just wondering.
But I wouldn't recommend that book per se.
Yeah, not anymore.
My personal experience.
Yeah.
Like different forms of information. People like documentary films. They like films. Then like the earlier films about China. They're good ones. Probably open eyes to certain things. Like 霸王别姬 was such a good film.
Mm-hmm.
霸王别姬 The Farewell Concubine.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. They were fantastic films. Like, you get curious of the background, historical background of that love story. Then you go explore the historical background. That how that can be your entry point. So.
Okay, yeah.
I wouldn't recommend it. Officially, I'm supposed to recommend go to Human Rights Watch's website, check out what we say. It's boring.
Is it boring?
So yeah.
Is it boring though, or do you like do fun stuff?
I would recommend to read some of our opinion pieces. They're not that boring. I mean, our official writing is very like legalistic international human rights law. They can be boring. So better if you really want to get into to know, better read some media articles like magazines. They're easier to read.
Yeah. Maybe this will be something that you should do. Like do more fun media. Like the Communist Party has been trying to brand itself as fun and sexy with their videos.
Yeah, then. You have to be that, of course, an institutional decision, like to what extent, how far fun you can be without making, say the wrong things, because we work in this legalistic framework. Like, you need to be very careful with your language, stuff like that. So. Okay,
well, yeah. Okay. Anyway, we've been almost talking here for 90 minutes. I'm very sorry. I take so much of your time.
I like talking. It helps, like, clear my mind, because those are great questions. Like, what would I recommend? Right?
For me, talking, I noticed this. Often thoughts, they float around in my head, and I cannot grip them. I cannot access them, but they are there. And once I talk to somebody, then I'm forced to take them however well I can and put them out there. And I have to make them understandable for somebody else. So that means I need to understand them first.
Yeah.
And that's a very nice process. And so I like talking. I talk a lot.
But I mean, talking, like, sometimes I feel like I'm not expressing coherent thoughts because it's harder than writing. Like, I worry about the person who is the recipient of my talking, because I'm not saying something coherent.
Well, but in talking, and I think, again, this is the nice thing about Clubhouse. You have intonation. When you see each other, you can see the face. You can probe. You can say stuff and then kind of, go back from it a little bit and be like, well, I just kind of, I was probing here. I wasn't so serious. But in writing, it seems as though if you don't really master it very, very well, it is there for posterity. This thing that you with a period at the end is there. It's a real statement.
Yeah. But if you're doing a recording, it's still, talking. I mean, like,
true. True, but but it's like the gravity of it seems different.
That's true, because what you written down is like more like thoughtful arguments that you're actually making. People can make excuses for when they're talking, saying, it's just talking, right? You can't say the same thing, like, it's just writing.
Yes. Yeah, you can't. I think writing has a lot more gravity to it, a lot more responsibility. I like writing, but I find it very exhausting. Talking, depending on the partner, not so much. It's kind of like a process where we both put in some effort, and in the end, between us, will be something that we created together. But as a writer, I have to imagine you, and some, like, I have to create that feedback from you myself. I have to do both things at the same time. And it seems exhausting, to be honest.
But do you feel like you have what's your first language like you feel mostly comfortable expressing?
That's a very good question. German is the language where I'm most fluent in.
Uh-huh.
I prefer English because I'm dumber in it, because I don't look for words as much. If I want to talk about blood, it will be red, because I don't know I don't know scarlet and all these different colors of red. But if I was to write something in German, then I would think like, how do I want to structure the sentence? Which red is it really? And how can it be like, it should be really something. It's German after all. So I feel less what's that word, like inhibited in English. Like I'm free in English. I can even talk about sex in English. I could never talk about sex in German. Not to that extent. It gets disgusting very fast. Okay,
but is there something to the German language, like it's more nuanced, like there are different, all kinds of different words. That's stereotype of German too. Like all these different words, I have to choose the precise one.
I think it's precise in some areas. It's imprecise in other areas. Like, for example, English is vastly superior in the times. Like I could say, I will be thinking about something. This is something I could never do in German. Like it would be like, yeah, I think tomorrow. But no, the number of words that you could use is actually much more in English. It's about 700,000 in total. Nobody knows them, but that's the total. It has about 400,000. But just because I was born with it, it feels like I owe German the effort, but I don't owe English shit. It's fine. Okay. Like, everybody can write like Bukowski. Of course, nobody can really do it. But you can make easy, simple sentences that go like, I woke up, I went to the store. Yeah, you can do that. And it seems kind of fine because it's not your language. In German, that would be insulting. Because it is my language. And so, yeah, I'm very comfortable in Chinese, but I fumble for words a lot because I don't have the vocabulary. But there also I have this feeling of like, yeah, I'm not responsible really. It's not my language. I don't know how you feel.
I think when you're saying that, actually I feel the same way, but it was never expressed to me. So when I hear you, I was like, actually I feel that way. I just didn't feel that way. No, so because I do feel responsibility when I read Chinese. When I write Chinese, I need to write good Chinese, like using 成语 or reference, like classic Chinese, stuff like that. I feel like I need to write good Chinese because I'm Chinese. But first of all, I don't have the ability to do that. I wasn't trained in any way in those sophisticated Chinese. Chinese, I can read Chinese paper, paper. So I don't have the ability to do that. I mean, a lot of my friends who actually do, they, study, they love the classic Chinese and they know Chinese language or culture and history so much better than I do. But still, I feel that I have a responsibility. But in English, it's like, I learned English when I was a teen, when I was 15. Like, I'm pretty good already. Yeah. I don't feel the responsibility. And I think sometimes I feel sad because now I write mostly in English. And I realize actually it's easier for me to write in English. And it's very, very sad feeling because just because I live in this country, that's my job, I feel I'm losing the Chinese because, I learned English when I was 14, 15. So yeah, it's like, how am I losing this? Then I thought, like, if I have children in the future, what am I going to do? And I need to go study Chinese like, my child does, because otherwise, like, I'm not passing this to my child or not creating an environment for my child so my child knows the heritage. Anyway, I don't know, so it's not a worry that I have now.
Yeah, no, but I get the point. One thing that I would worry about is, for me, Chinese is vastly overrated. Because Chinese people like to say it's so hard because they're Chinese, and then it feels nice that their language is so hard, or you are Chinese and it feels so nice for you. And then foreigners like me, we like to say it's so hard because we learned it, so we're obviously geniuses, and it's so rich and blah blah. When actually, in a lot of cases, it's really a very inefficient language. Like when you say 我喜欢一个人，我喜欢一个人, like this is something that they're proud of. I'm like, this language sucks in this aspect because what are you trying to say? You're trying to communicate, aren't you? And you're like, oh, 博大精深. No, this is not 博大精深. This just sucks. But Chinese poetry, like this Li Bai stuff, Bai Juyi stuff, I literally get moved to tears. I cannot say the same about poetry in German or in English.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. I think Chinese is very good descriptively, like describe things and feelings that are good. But Chinese is terrible in expressing logical reasoning. It's terrible. It's like, okay, especially just read the translation of Kant, Immanuel Kant. It's unreadable.
But like, okay, but wait, I have to interrupt. I'm sorry. Kant is unreadable in German.
Okay.
You can.
But I think there's a difference between. I mean, I can read the English translation, the Chinese translation. The English translation is so much better in understanding. And Chinese it sucks in like when you try to make a logical reasoning, like making an argument. It just doesn't work.
I get the point. I get this a lot in my comments when people they say, Chris, you make such, or Lale, you make such like logical points. This is because you're German, because the Germans they have this logical brain, and we Chinese, we don't have this. What I think is I'm very logical because I'm very limited in my language, and I have to really think about what is the first point and the second point, and what's the connection there, and like how I build it up. So it sounds logical, but if I was fluent, I would kind of, muddle my way through just like everybody else. There might be something to this argument that Chinese is not a very good language to talk about logical arguments. I
think that's obvious. I feel that's like obvious. I think there are a lot of nationalistic feelings towards language. Everybody, it's like Chinese food. Is Chinese food that good? I mean,
yes.
If I had to eat one food, I would eat Chinese food because that's what I eat. But I mean, there are so many good foods. Like, okay, I wouldn't say. I wouldn't say German food is that good.
No, nobody would say German food. Come on.
There's so many good Chinese good food that are equally good as Chinese food. I don't think there's anything special about Chinese food. Of course, Chinese food is a huge category to begin with, but I think there were a lot of like nationalistic feeling as well as the lack of experience outside of Chinese culture and Chinese language.
On the language thing, yes. On the food thing, I think you're speaking from the privileged position of a person that was born Chinese, and I feel offended because you're taking for granted this thing that was for granted for you, but it wasn't for anybody outside. We came to China and we were like, what the hell? Like this disgusting thing, tofu, that vegans eat and vegetarian. I'm vegetarian. But like we eat it and we're like, oh, tofu, it's not egg, it's not milk, blah, blah. It's disgusting. But then the Chinese, you guys, you take it and it's wonderful. And it's in so many different, like who talks about Chinese cuisine? It's 8? Is it 8 cuisines or 9?
I don't know.
Yeah, it's a lot. Like Chinese food is very different from Sichuan food, right?
Yeah.
And they all find ways to do magic with food. As a German, I feel like you talking shit about Chinese food is insulting to me because it's privilege.
I think I try to make the point that there are alternative good food, but I wouldn't put German food as the same. But they're Vietnamese food, they're Thai food. Those food are as equal as Chinese food. So
I have never been there to any of those places. The places that I've been to, I don't know, maybe Italian food is also food that is kind of respectable and can hold its own. Maybe French food. I don't have the money for it. But I mean, coming from a German, I'm really impressed by Chinese food. I can tell you that. I remember being in the cafeteria on the second day in China with a guy from Ireland, and he was standing next to me, and he was pointing at a thing that I couldn't identify because you can never tell with Chinese food what it actually is. And he was like, "That's eggplant. If there's one thing they know, it's eggplant." I had never known that I liked eggplant before I came to China. Who likes eggplant? But then you're an eggplant country, like, and there's not just eggplant that they know that you know. So yeah, from that perspective, bad at logic, good at food, definitely.
I mean, Chinese food is good.
Yeah, except for
I live in New York. There are so many good foods. So
yeah. Okay.
Also, I think Chinese food is too oily for me. Now, for my taste, I just feel that way.
Okay, I get the oiliness. I'm gonna try just now. I'm gonna wrap this up. I'm sorry. I'm gonna try and take Chinese cabbage and throw it in a pan. I got my hands on some Sichuan pepper, and I'm gonna stir fry it and stink up the place. And I'm gonna use so much oil. So yeah, you're right. There is a lot of oil there. But this is gonna be my little way of connecting to China. To stink up the place and have my cabbage. Yeah. Our last question: are you super happy about like now the Trumpism is over? Is it over?